Are Chelsea in the mix as title contenders?
Do you know what I think they are? Well, they hammered Paris Saint-Germain in the final.
What they did in that Club World Cup, and especially the final, was a massive statement.
You do worry about the Club World Cup catching up with them later on in the campaign, unless Maresca can come up with a formula where he can rotate his team on a regular basis, and he's going to have to.
Enzo Maresca has proved himself to be a ruthless manager. In terms of can they compete on two fronts, I think they've got the players to do so.
Is the defence and goalkeeper still an issue?
Maybe those are the two positions now, central defence and goalkeeper, where perhaps they're gettable.
This is a team that have got momentum behind them.
Yeah, I'm much more excited about Chelsea going forward this season than I was perhaps 6 months ago.
What other business are they looking to do?
Even if they sign Simons, Paul Winstanley remains a massive fan of Garnacho. You might get him for as little as £30 or £40 million.
Does Chelsea really need another winger?
Strangely, despite all the amount of people that they've had and the money they've spent, I'm not sure there's great quality there.
When he's liking transfer stories from Fabrizio Romano linking him with clubs, that tells you why United want him off the wage bill. He's got a little bit of talent, but I'll tell you what, he's got one massive ego.
It's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's Alex Crook, and Scott Minto, FA Cup winner extraordinaire, is back. And this time next week, we will all be back together in the studio. I'm currently in New York City, the great Big Apple. The boys are back at base, and Scott, he sent me a romantic message this week. He did. A little crookie baby sent me a message. When are you coming home?
Is he missing you already, is he?
I don't know. I think so. That was the vibe that I was getting. I thought that he maybe needed a little bit of Matterface company.
It was more the heavy lifting that I'm having to do on 10 till 1 on a Friday and a Thursday this week with you enjoying yourself.
Well, I'm
going
to be helping on Thursday, so I'm just got the call, see if I can help Crookie sound good. So I said, look, I'll try my best, but we'll see how that one goes.
Yes, looking forward to that. Crookmeister, how have you been? What have you been up to, apart from doing the heavy lifting of actually doing 2 days' work this week?
Well, you know, the transfer window keeps on delivering, trying to keep on top of the Alexander Isak / Benjamin Šeško saga in particular. But I did manage 4 days out of 5 at Glorious Goodwood, so it's not been all work and no play.
I was going to say, I mean, it doesn't sound right. You worked 2 days and had to do lots of transfer stuff. There must have been some social in there. Otherwise, there's something going awry in the world. Look, we're going to continue our look at some of the runners and riders in the Premier League. We're going to continue that today with Chelsea, the world champions. Today, we're talking a little bit about some of the clubs that have struggled a little bit to do some business this summer too. In particular, West Ham, Crystal Palace and Brentford, who haven't really set the world alight in the transfer market. And there have been 1 or 2 rumblings behind the scenes about those clubs. Plus, we'll do transfers. Crookie's already mentioned the big saga, Benjamin Šeško and Alexander Isak. Is that going to rumble on right the way to deadline day? Big news this week. Paulinho has joined Spurs. Son has headed off to the Sunset Boulevard. Get it? Chelsea sign another youngster, but a good one. Ramsdale goes north. Wrexham sign Connor Cody. And there are a few more to get our teeth into a little bit later on. Don't you worry, we will answer the big questions of the week, no doubt about it. Now, though, let's get into what we will be doing for the next 10, 15 minutes or so, which is looking at Chelsea's hopes this season. Can they build on their Club World Cup triumph? A summer of success off the field and on it for Chelsea. The Club World Cup was won in stunning style against PSG. The incomings and outgoings have been flowing once again. The high wire financial gymnastics have continued, and Chelsea look to be in a much better position going into 25-26 than maybe they did at this time last year when they were a little bit unknown because of Enzo Maresca coming in and a few changes to the playing squad. Are Chelsea in the mix as title contenders? And if not, why not? Crook.
Do you know what I think they are? I've been looking at the odds for the title this morning. There's not much with most bookmakers to separate Liverpool, the favourites, with Arsenal and Manchester City. Chelsea are a double-figure price with most firms, and I think maybe the market is sleeping on what they achieved at the end of last season. Now, I spent the whole of last season expecting them to fall flat on their faces. I didn't think they'd make the Champions League. I certainly didn't think they would go to America and win the Club World Cup. And yes, there will be people who say that's only a glorified friendly tournament. I was one of them using it as a stick to beat you guys with when you were basking in your glory.
Which was rude.
They hammered Paris Saint-Germain in the final. And this was a PSG side who'd built up so much momentum from winning the Champions League, the teams they've beaten in the second half of the season. I think that has to go down as a statement result. And then I look at the fixtures that Chelsea have got to start their season, talking about momentum and picking up where they left off in the States. Palace at home looks a really favourable opening weekend for me. Then they go to West Ham, which I know is a game that always comes with a bit of needle. Fulham at home, we beat them last season. And then Brentford away. There's not much in those first 4 games that I think will scare Chelsea. And I think João Pedro is motivated to be Brazil's number 9 at the World Cup next summer. And if he can stay fit, and that is a big if because he had a lot of injury issues at Brighton, I think he could be one of the signings of the summer. I would make Chelsea contenders. I don't think they'll win it, but they certainly shouldn't be as big a price for the bookies as they are.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because after travelling halfway across the globe, certainly across the entirety of North America during the course of the summer, Scott Minto, and I know you were doing the same thing as well, following them out in North America. They've got a very light first few weeks of the season. In fact, they don't leave the capital until mid-September.
Yeah, I watched the final in Canada, Montreal, then had a good few weeks in Mexico. So I feel like I've done a sort of time zone. Only just got back yesterday. Listen, they were brilliant in the final, weren't they? I haven't really talked about it. I know it's a long time ago now, but tactics were spot on. Big gamble with what the team that he picked. It was only one change from the one where they lost in the group stages. But they out PSG'd PSG. And I thought they were absolutely superb. And it's one thing to win the Europa Conference League final. They should have done. It's another thing to get into the Champions League places, which I didn't think they were going to, but I think it was really good that they did. People could argue with the money they spent, they should. So they've done that, and that's really good for Maresca. What they did in that Club World Cup, and especially the final, was a massive statement. Now, the good part of that is that you're Club World Cup champions, and not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. You can attract a lot of money, players, that you want to. With that, though, comes expectation. And to be honest with you, I hate agreeing with Crookie, but I agree totally with him that I don't expect Chelsea to win the title, but the way they're continually building, I mean, they've made 8 signings already and they're looking to make more. I mean, they've got the best accountant in the world. I thought Daniel Levy was pretty good, but this one's a hell of a lot better. So to think where they are, and I've heard Crookie say this before, and I know I agree with him. One, that the lads are young, but 2, the way that Maresca has, even in the Club World Cup, rotated the players. I think he's able to do that here for the season as well. But it is another thing, and I go back to one team in the Europa Conference, one team in the Premier League, but this almost got to be the same team, or certainly very, very strong Champions League and Premier League this season.
Well, this is the key, isn't it? Because last season he had the ability to do those massive rotations. It kept a lot of the players fresh, which is why maybe they came gooder towards the end of the season. You do worry about the Club World Cup catching up with them later on in the campaign. Maybe they'll start strongly, then fizzle out around December time and then come back strong again, unless Maresca can come up with a formula where he can rotate his team on a regular basis. And he's going to have to, because the exertions of the Champions League and the Premier League are so much greater than those that were facing them last season when they were only operating in the Conference League. They have brought in new signings, and Scott has already referenced that. Esteval, Delap, Esugo, Sarr, who's gone back out on loan, João Pedro, Gittins, Hatto. 5 of those at least will go into the first team squad. Plus, they have managed to get a few players out as well, haven't they? In João Felix, Petrovic, Kepa, Madueke, Humphreys, Samuel Smith, Leslie Ugachuk, who looks like he's going to Burnley for cash, and Dewsbury Hall might be the next one out as well. There seems to be a lot of horse trading, a lot of comings and goings. Now, I wonder if that's because this is a new ownership group and they're just getting their feet under the table and getting things right, or can you still do that after 3 years and suggest that that's the case after 3 years, Crook? Or is it because they're constantly correcting mistakes and trying to go through this high wire financial balancing act?
Well, they have made mistakes. There's no question about that. And it has felt to me at times like the sporting directors, Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart and the two owners, Burdad Egbali and Todd Bowley, have almost been playing Championship Manager with the sheer volume of players that they've bought and sold. And the list you gave there, people like Ogachukwu were only signed in a recent transfer window. They spent big money on João Felix, and I think we all were scratching our head at the time about why they needed João Felix, and it turned out actually they didn't need João Felix, but they've sold him for decent money, albeit to a club in Saudi Arabia who may have a link to Clear Lake. Maybe that's for another podcast, but they are getting players off the wage bill. Raheem Sterling, I'm sure, will go. There's interest in him from overseas and from the likes of Fulham in the Premier League as well. Ben Chilwell is still there on big money. But Enzo Maresca has proved himself to be a ruthless manager. What he didn't want to do when he came at the start of last season was have almost two squads and so many players sort of clogging up the training ground. He was very harsh and firm in his stance with the likes of Sterling and Chilwell, but it paid off because it meant they had to leave the club, and I'm sure that will happen again. In terms of can they compete on two fronts, I think they've got the players to do so. I mean, you're going to ask in a minute who should lead the line. Is it João Pedro? Is it Nicholas Jackson, who, unless they get £80 million, is still going to be there? Or is it Liam Delap, who they've snapped up for a bargain fee? Those are decent options in the forward position. They've got options all over the pitch now.
Yeah, and I suppose that is the question, isn't it? Who does get the nod at number 9? João Pedro obviously starred in the Club World Cup after coming in from Brighton right in the middle of the tournament. Delap played his part too. You get the feeling that those two, after being acquired, are going to be Maresca's first choice. But Nicholas Jackson, if he is around, does have a role to play too, Scott, doesn't he, Vice President of the Nicholas Jackson Supporters Club?
No, I know I've heard Crookie say that before. It's not that I think he's, the next Didier Drogba. It's just I think he, in that first season, he was better, or I saw potential where others perhaps didn't. Look, at the moment, he's third choice. But you're talking about, we just talked about Champions League and Premier League together. Then you got the domestic cups as well. Maresca's already shown he's quite happy to rotate. It's not going to be the same 11 all the time. And I think that would be the same up front. João Pedro, I don't think anyone really expected the impact he made or would make in the Club World Cup. And you asked me just before the final who should start. And I said absolutely João Pedro, and another great performance. But there's no way he's going to be playing in every single game all season. The only thing I'd say about Nicholas Jackson is he can tend to sulk. And he's got to realise now that he's not the main man at Chelsea anymore, but does he want to be a team player? And if he does and works hard in training, then Maresca will give him minutes and it will be shared around. If it doesn't, then there could be a problem.
With all due respect, he was never really the main man. That always fell on the shoulders of Cole Palmer. 18 goals, 14 assists from 52 games last season. I know you're talking about leading the line here, but he is the sensational talent in that squad. He is the one on which so many of their hopes rely. I just wonder what sort of tactical changes, adaptations we're going to see from Enzo Maresca, because this was the situation last year. They would keep the ball, they'd play quite slow, patient approach play. They create a lot of chances and not necessarily take them, and then find themselves maybe only narrowly ahead in a game, then sit off and then have to go again or get pegged back. There needs to be some sort of level, I think, of an injection of pace and power. Do they play more like they did in the Club World Cup final? Do they have a slightly different variation of plan B that comes into play when they're in the Champions League? I don't know. What are we going to see from Enzo Maresca next season, do we think?
Well, that was something that you were quite critical of him, certainly towards the end of the season when results started to go awry, and you were saying that he didn't have the ability to sort of see in advance what opposition teams were going to do to stifle his tactics and therefore adapt accordingly. I don't think you could level that in at the Club World Cup.
It wasn't just me, Crook. He was saying that himself. I would ask him, what has happened today when they went to Copenhagen and struggled for 45 minutes. And he would say, well, I didn't see the fact that they were going to play 5 at the back coming. They've never done that before. And it was like, well, what did you expect they were going to do? You're Chelsea, you're the biggest team in this competition. You knew that they were going to bank up against you. You needed to be more inventive in the way you found gaps in that back line. And he said that not once, not twice, but 2 or 3 times towards the end of the season. It became sort of quite a repetitive phrase from him. And even in the final itself against Real Betis, remember the first 45 minutes was not great. Obviously, they were much better at the Club World Cup, especially in the final. But there was a little bit of criticism about him using players at right back like Caicedo when they had Gusto and James available, Scott. So he wasn't immune from criticism last year. Do you think that the Club World Cup final win just wipes all that away and he has a clean slate to be able to do what he likes this campaign?
Well, I think if you remember, you talk about me defending Nicholas Jackson. I was defending Enzo Maresca as well.
You were. You were the chairman of his fan club.
Vice president of Jackson and chairman.
In fact, I heard you started his Instagram.
I don't know what went on Instagram. I don't use that too much. Look, I think yes, probably to the people from the outside, to not just win the actual competition, but win in the way they did against the best team I believe in the world was nothing short of sensational. And I know what you're saying. I'll go back to that sort of right back. He put Caicedo there, which you don't want there, but he wanted Enzo and Lavia in there. And there's going to be issues, but because of the Champions League, Premier League combinations, he should be able to say to the players that whatever I'm doing for this particular game, I'll use you for the next one. And that's where I think that Nicholas Jackson and others who perhaps might have to sit on the sidelines at times will need to realise that actually they're not the main player in their position now, and they have to be willing to sacrifice themselves going forward. Enzo Maresca, in answer to your question, he's already shown that he can play different ways and different players in different positions. So he will treat each different game in a different way. And it's just whether the players will buy into that. And I think that's the important thing for him going forward now.
Is the defence and goalkeeper still an issue, Crook?
I think the goalkeeper for sure, although having said that, he had a really good final, didn't he, over in the States? His distribution was exceptional, started a lot of the attacks by going long, but I still worry about mistakes that he would make. Defensively, obviously, they've signed Hato. I know that they're excited about him. I think he's been signed as a left-back primarily, but he can play as a left-sided central defender as well. There was a lot of Premier League interest in him. Levi Colwill, I think, grew in command as the season went on, so I think he could have a really big year, but maybe he needs somebody a little bit more solid alongside him. I mean, one of the redemption stories of the season was Mark Cucurella, maligned by Chelsea fans at the start of the season, absolutely adored by them at the end. But I take your point. Maybe those are the two positions now, central defence and goalkeeper, where perhaps they're gettable. Don't underestimate the role that Moises Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez will play in protecting that back line.
Well, Moises Caicedo has been absolutely terrific wherever he has played. If he has to play at right back, then he has been sensational there, although he's not great at defending in that area. But the ball behind him sometimes gets him and he gets wandering into midfield. There's a big gap there. That's a problem. But when he's in midfield and he's breaking up play and he's making things happen, he's absolutely terrific. You talk about Jarell Hato, and I sent you a lot of information about him last week, didn't I, when I was suggesting to you that the current Porto manager, Farioli, who was at Ajax over the last year, converted him from a centre-back to a left-back. And the reason he did that is because he believed that this player is going to play in the Premier League, right? So he looked at him and he said, this player is going to definitely play in the Premier League, Jarell Hato. But he's not big enough to play at centre-half in that league. He's not big enough to play international football at centre-half. He will be better at left-back. So I'm going to spend the next year turning him into a left-back, because although he's played there occasionally, most of his football has been played at centre-back. But last year, basically, he was a left-back. And as a result of that, I think that's where Chelsea are going to use him. Certainly in the Premier League, that's more likely. Maybe in Europe, he might step into a back three occasionally, might play left-sided centre-half in an emergency, but I expect him to play as a left-back more often than not. What other business are they looking to do, Crook, very quickly? Because obviously Xavi has been linked.
Yeah, that one's gone a little bit quiet in the last week or so, but I think he's still firmly in their thoughts. And Alejandro Garnacho liking a tweet from Fabrizio Romano saying that Chelsea is still interested in him. That was a story that we reported last week, that even if they sign Simons, Paul Winstanley, one of the sporting directors I've already mentioned, remains a massive fan of Garnacho. I think they see an opportunity because Manchester United are going to have to lower their valuation, which in January was £50 to £60 million. You might get him for as little as £30 or £40 million this summer. So I certainly think that's one that could still happen.
When I heard about this last week, Scott, I thought, does Chelsea really need another winger?
Do you know what? It's a really good question. So I actually went into the Chelsea website yesterday and wrote down all the players for each position. And although there is an incredible amount of attacking players, in terms of quality of strength in depth. I'm not sure it's quite there. Don't forget Sancho's gone. Mudryk can't be used. Madueke's gone. I was disappointed about that. So you've got Neto, Palmer, Gittins. Tyreek George, I don't know what's going to happen. He's a promising youngster, but we'll see whether he will be at Chelsea this season. Andre Santos, I thought, did well, but he was like a holding midfielder. But he's more of an attacking one, but still unproven. Dewsbury Hall, you've already mentioned, and Kunku must be on his way to going as well. And then there's Mudryk himself. I actually, strangely, despite all the amount of people that they've had and the money they've spent, I'm not sure there's great quality there. One thing you can say, obviously, Palmer could play out wide. Joao Pedro could play as the 10. So there's lots of different variations there. And Maresca, talk about Hato and how versatile he is. Maresca likes his versatile players. But yeah, I think in terms of pure quality, I think they probably need another one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I still think he'll set up with 4 at the back, 2 in midfield, the 10, the 2 wide, and the main striker now on most occasions. I think they'll do that. Maybe there will be times when Enzo Fernandez plays in the 10 to bolster that midfield when they feel as if they might get overrun in that area, and they might move Palmer wide, as you've already mentioned, or play him as the false 9, although I think that's a lot less likely now, bearing in mind the new acquisitions that they have made. With Delap as a forward, it gives them a physical presence that they did not have previously. So he will look to win lots of free kicks, especially late in games. I expect him to be used as a substitute more than anything else, especially early in the season. But I think the big thing about Chelsea going into this new season is the fact that this is a team that have been written off, maybe even by their own manager towards the end of last year, came into the end of the season winning the Conference League, getting into the Champions League, and then winning the Club World Cup. This is a team that have got momentum behind them. And Scott, when you are a team that has started to win things, that has a huge effect, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you only look back at what happened with Jose Mourinho in his first season when they won the Carabao Cup and the importance he put on that, the emphasis, and then we all know what happened in his first reign there. So, yeah, absolutely. We've been saying for a long time, the youngest Premier League side ever. Well, now, actually, they're winning stuff. And when you have that, coupled with the athleticism they've got and the belief they've got, the more experience that they're getting, then, yeah, I'm much more excited about Chelsea going forward this season than I was perhaps 6 months ago.
Okay, that's it for Chelsea. We'll continue to profile the runners and riders in the title race across the next few weeks. In fact, we've got a huge preview coming your way next week, Monday and Wednesday, parts 1 and 2 of our big season preview. Make sure you join us for that on our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. Thank you very much, by the way, for all of you that have been watching over the course of the summer, the dark period, as we call it, when there's not much Premier League action. Because we've seen the numbers go crazy over the last couple of weeks, and we'll continue to give you as much information as we can before the big kickoff at the, what's the 16th, is it, of August? Something like that. It's only a couple of weeks away now. Next, we're going to turn our attention to some of the established Premier League sides who have stood a little still before the start of the new campaign. Okay, time to delve into some of those clubs that haven't really spent too much money, look at the reasons why, and see if they will do before the end of the transfer window. And some clubs that are causing a little bit of concern for their supporters, maybe even some of their managers. The curtain closed on Crystal Palace's 24-25 campaign, leaving an indelible mark on the club's history. It was a season that transcended expectations, culminating in unprecedented success, setting a new benchmark for the South London club, an FA Cup triumph for the first time, and qualification for Europe. But the summer has seen nothing but turmoil off the field, and the manager complaining about the lack of investment in the playing squad. They're embroiled in one of the sagas of the summer regarding the Europa League and their participation in it. And as we sit here right now, we still don't know which European league they're going to be playing in next season. Is that a problem, Scott? Is that as disrupted as we all think it would be?
From a playing point of view, no, I don't think so. I think you're going to be playing in Europe. I think if it was, are you in Europe or are you not at all, then there would be a problem. The question is just which competition now. And look, I think they'd obviously want to be in the Europa League, but I genuinely think any English team that participates in the Europa Conference League final, I mean, Chelsea, you can times it by 10 with the money that they spent, but any English team at that tier of European football has a great chance of winning the competition. So, look, if I were Crystal Palace fans, and we'll have to wait and see what happens, whether they do get into the Europa League or not. But if they're in the Conference League, they've got a great chance of not just going deep, but winning yet another competition. And that would be amazing for them.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. That is an opportunity, but it's not the opportunity that they wanted. They want to be in the Europa League. They earned a place in the Europa League, and they feel, and I can understand this, they feel they should be in it. And to be honest, from a player's perspective, if you have scored the winning goal like Eberechi Eze in the FA Cup final, then you think you've earned your team a place in the group stage of the Europa League, and then they tell you you're playing in the Conference League, I don't think you can help but be disappointed with that. I think that is going to have an effect. Whether it has an effect on performance or not is something completely different. Scott?
The only thing I'd say to that is if it was a Europa League, Champions League, that's a big jump. Champions League is the big one. You know, it's not just in terms of money and bonuses, but in terms of the top table of European football and arguably the most difficult competition to win, or certainly from a cup competition anyway. Europa League to Conference League, I don't think will be quite the same. Of course, publicly players and staff and chairman and manager will be saying, oh, you know, it's outrage. And it is an outrage. But honestly, it's not as big a jump from the Conference League to Europa League as Europa League to Champions League is.
No, their manager also has had some problems as well. He's questioned where his new signings are. He openly said last week, I've only got 17 outfield players to work with, and I've got a situation where I was promised extra investment. And that hasn't come. That might mean a slow start to the season. And when you look at their start to the season, it is a difficult one because they have the Community Shield live on talkSPORT on Sunday against Liverpool. Then they have Chelsea away on the opening weekend of the season, Nottingham Forest home, and then Villa, Sunderland, West Ham, Liverpool, Everton, Bournemouth and Arsenal before we get to November. Crook, what is the situation? Because 17 currently is the score on the door as far as the squad is concerned. And then they've got to deal with all the vultures circling over Mateta, Eze and Gay.
Yeah, and I think I take on board Scott's point, actually, the gap between the Europa League and the Conference League maybe isn't, well, certainly not as significant as the Europa League and the Champions League, but I think it will hamper your recruitment if you can offer Europa League football as opposed to Conference League football. I think that probably has had a knock-on effect that they don't know what European competition they'll be playing in. The draw's actually been made for their playoff round. They're likely to play FC Midtjylland of Denmark. They're experienced European campaigners. So as much as Scott says they'll go deep in the draw, I think that's quite a tricky tie in terms of Conference League qualifications, if indeed it ends up being Midtjylland. When it comes to Eze, I think the anticipation is that Arsenal will bid at some point between now and they close the window. So that is an unwanted headache for Palace. It's a little bit quiet on Mark Gay at this stage, but I know Liverpool are still keen to sign a central defender. So don't completely rule out losing both those star players between now and September the 1st. If that does happen, I would fear for Palace in terms of maybe looking over their shoulders towards the bottom three.
Because this is interesting, right? There's a lot of optimism amongst the supporters, and quite rightly so after what happened last year. It feels like this is a moment where Crystal Palace should be building, should be going again rather than regressing at this point. It's difficult when you're successful because if you are a smaller team that has success, immediately people come and pick your best players away. But you need to have a plan for that, right? It's incumbent on the board and the sporting directors. I know they've had a change there in all of those positions. I think chief financial officer, chief operating officer, sporting director. Obviously, Woody Johnson has come in on the board as a result of his investment into the club. All of that has changed behind the scenes this summer, so that's made things more difficult. But you would have thought there needs to be a plan in place to get Glasner the players that he wants, because otherwise, this is a guy who's highly sought after, Crook.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a little bit surprised that Glasner came out at the end of last season and committed himself so strongly. Maybe it was in the afterglow of winning the FA Cup. Maybe the interest in him from Germany that we reported at the time wasn't perhaps as strong as we first thought. But yeah, he is a manager who is going to want backing. Obviously, there's the situation with the takeover still to be ratified by the Premier League. Maybe that's having an impact. Because let's be honest, we had John Textor on with Jim and Simon, and he was public about it. He said that Steve Parish has only one ambition, and that's to stay in the Premier League. So Steve Parish might look at the teams that are coming up. All three have gone down in each of the last two seasons and think, well, actually, I don't need to spend a lot of money because those three promoted teams are going straight back down. I think that might be a dangerous tactic.
You could catch a cold that way, Scotty, couldn't you? Because Crystal Palace are one of those clubs that are only ever one really bad season away from falling out of the Premier League.
Yeah, look, you only have to look at my Charlton to say something like that, really. And obviously, Palace being neighbours, we'll understand that. And look, I listened to you guys while I was away on the pod, and when you're talking about the 3 promoted sides, they're going to be stronger this year. Certainly, Sunderland, I think, have done really well, actually. I think Leeds will be stronger. And Scotty Parker will make Burnley as strong as he possibly can as well. So the 3 teams coming up this particular season will be stronger than the 3 teams that were there last season. And look, Oliver Glasner's had a plan. He's had a plan all along, and he's wanting to sign a new contract, but only if he's been given the players to try and kick on. And if Steve Parish is not only not signing players to kick on, but they're possibly losing players and just standing still. Well, if you stand still in the Premier League, then you move backwards. So there is a massive problem there. I think Glasner is such a good manager, and the players they already have, I don't think relegation will be a problem. But just when the fans want to see, after what, and it was an historic season last season, for them to at least try to kick on, it looks like Parish at this moment in time isn't even trying to do that. And I'm not buying they don't know the Europa League, Europa Conference League. First of all, players come for money and also the project. And if I were Palace, I would be absolutely selling it to the players that we have a great chance to win a European trophy here if we're in the Conference League.
Of course, there is also the factor that we should always caveat all of our discussions with. This is being recorded Monday, 4th of August, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 2 o'clock wherever you guys are. The fact is that Crystal Palace may end up selling those 2 big assets, Gay and Eze, before the transfer window, and then going on a late splurge. That does happen. And those late splurges sometimes have an impact further down the line. And if you listen to Glasner, he said, look at last year, for example, it took them a long while to get the players that they wanted in. And then it took even longer for them to get up to speed before they found their rhythm in the Premier League. They had a terrible start to the campaign, but it doesn't look great at this moment in time. And with the added commitments, I think that could cause problems for them.
Yeah, I agree. And as you've already said, I think it's dangerous just to assume that because it's happened the last 2 seasons, these 3 promoted teams are going to be bad. I actually think, and we talked about it before, Sunderland in particular are going to cause a headache for 1 or 2 of the so-called established sides, those who look like they're rooted in the Premier League. And obviously Palace have a history of getting off to slow starts to the seasons, not just under Oliver Glasner, but they did it famously under De Boer, and obviously needed to change manager to stay up. And you've mentioned they've got a tricky set of fixtures at the start of the season. It wouldn't take much to get into a slump, and they've still got this uncharted territory of balancing their domestic ambitions with a European campaign, be it in the Conference League or the Europa League. And with 17 senior players, that's going to be difficult.
Uncharted territory for Keith Andrews at Brentford. The team many are signalling for a tough season. Manager and backroom staff gone. Captain gone. Best player gone. Second best player is currently on strike. All going very well, isn't it, for your former studio teammate, Scott Minto? Poor old Keith Andrews has been handed a bit of a hospital pass. That's like one of your dodgy questions that you used to throw him back in the day.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say one of my dodgy passes I'd play up to the
Never.
forward.
Absolutely never. Genius FA Cup winning left back.
Yeah, look, we've said this before about how I think even if they kept all their players from last season and it was just Thomas Frank who had gone, anybody coming in, I think, would find it difficult. But for Keith coming in, his first job ever as a manager, he's obviously been around a very long time in terms of a coach. But then you mentioned lose your best player, second best player looks like he's in the go, most influential player has already gone as well. But I know that Brentford TV have sort of mic'd him up and shown him in training and he's come across well. The players seem to be responding to him. They seem to have taken it on board because the first thing you do when you become a manager for the first time is try to get the respect of the players. And I believe he's got that. One thing I would say is, from a positive point of view, I think Kelleher for Flecken is an upgrade. You've got Rico Henry and Aaron Hickey fit again. Michael Coyote, I think, is a decent signing. I really do. Nathan Collins is a very good player for them, and he's been made captain now. And with Vanderberg and Ethan Pinnock, I think defensively they're pretty good. Obviously, losing Norgard, that's a bit of a problem, a lot of a problem. But bringing in Jordan Henderson, massive influence both on and off the pitch. It's up front. where the issues are. You know, there are only Brentford were the only side in the Premier League last season that had 2 players that scored 15 plus league goals. And if both of those have gone, that's 39 league goals that's gone. So it's a massive problem. Thiago was injured all last season. We'll have to see how Malambo does. Kevin Schade, I think, did well last season, but he was the 3rd best of the 3. Scoring is the issue. If they can score goals, I think they'll be okay. If they can't, then they will be in a relegation fight.
There's no doubt that Brentford have been revered for how they've been run over the course of the last few years, but it does feel like this could be a season where things could catch up with them if they don't get a lucky break. Southampton were once lauded, the envy of the Premier League, because they were producing players and they were not challenging the big boys. But at one stage, I remember Ralph Hasenhuttl crying because they nearly went top of the league, or did go top of the league when they beat Liverpool, because they'd got that fast. But there is a stage when you can only keep selling your best players for so long before it catches up with you, Crook. And I think you have first-hand experience of that with Southampton.
Yeah, Southampton are a great example, but I guess you'd point to Brighton just along the coast as an example of where you can sell your best players and keep replenishing if your model works. And there are similarities because, of course, both Tony Bloom and Matthew Benham, his former business partner, do rely on data. So I'm not quite so doom and gloom about Brentford. And Scott's made a really good case for the defence. Obviously, it's a big gamble going for a rookie manager in Keith Andrews, but speaking to people in the game, his reputation as a coach is a good one. So let's see how he gets on. And then you look at the top end of the pitch. One player who might go a bit under the radar is Thiago, the striker they signed for £30 million, which is a record for a player coming out of the Belgian league back this time last year. He only played 7 games for Brentford because he picked up a really serious injury, and that ruled him out for most of the season. He's back. He scored during pre-season. So maybe he might just be a little bit of a dark horse to solve the Mbumo/Wissa-sized holes, because I do think Johan Wissa will end up at Newcastle.
And that is a big problem for Brentford, certainly, because relying on him, someone who is unproven in the Premier League, is always dangerous. However, they've got a track record of unearthing great talent, and I think they were disappointed last season that he picked up an injury, because he was supposed to be the replacement for Ivan Toney. What about West Ham United? It was not the greatest start to his tenure for Graham Potter. They've done little to no transfer business. Callum Wilson has come in, though. One big positive of signing him is that he won't score against West Ham, because he used to love doing that on a regular basis, Scott. Up top, they have Füllkrug, Wilson, and at the moment, Mikel Antonio, all very injury-prone or at the latter end of their career. I mean, what are the hopes for West Ham this season?
Yeah, well, look, it was a very underwhelming season last season, wasn't it? And I was one to try and champion the cause of Graham Potter, but I was disappointed. I thought he would have improved certain players and just make it look like it's a bit of a style. And I didn't really see anything. So I think this summer, very, very important. It looks like Mikel Antonio is not going to play. Maybe offering him a coaching role somewhere within the club. But if he wants to play, it won't be at West Ham. Füllkrug, I think fit is a very, very good player. Callum Wilson, fit is a very good player. But how often are they going to be fit? That's the problem. Jared Bowen, again, did the job up front. And actually, with Kudus going, the feel I'm getting from West Ham fans is not so much that he's gone is the problem, just that he's gone to Spurs. And, no West Ham wants to see that happening. But I actually quite kind of thought that Bowen's best position is on the right. Kudus' best position was on the right. So actually, this could be good, providing the strikers are fit. And look, even from a goalkeeper point of view, Fabianski's gone now. But he's had a poor pre-season. For me, he was never really a proper number one for a club the size of West Ham. So I feel they need to try and get a keeper in there. Even defensively, I think there's a bit of an issue. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Now,
Scott, you haven't found one positive yet, mate, to be honest with you. I've got to be honest with you. You've just picked holes in the entire squad. It's a bit of a worry, isn't it? And I can understand why the West Ham fans are incredibly frustrated, because when Graham Potter came in, he came in to replace a manager who was hugely unsuccessful and looked ill-suited for the squad that had been prepared for him. Now they're in a situation where they've spent a lot of money the previous summer to try and recruit for I think they were trying to recruit for Julian Lopetegui, although it didn't look necessarily like it was that balanced. Now they're in a situation where they haven't got a great squad. They haven't got a hell of a lot of money, or they're reluctant to spend it. So what is the future here? What happens next? Because as far as Graham Potter is concerned, he's in the last chance saloon in the Premier League, you would have thought, because this is a big opportunity for him. And for West Ham United, and we mentioned Crystal Palace, only one bad season away from a trip to the Championship. West Ham could fall into that category too.
I think they've got to hit the ground running, or there's going to be huge pressure on Graham Potter. Dare I say, similar pressure to Julian Lopetegui faced at the start of last season, because it didn't go well, did it? When Potter came in, they had that one victory at Arsenal, which was a bit of a defensive masterclass, hit them on the counter-attack and claimed a 1-0 win. But that was as good as it got for West Ham. I'm not quite as pessimistic as Scott. I've watched them a lot during pre-season. I think the wing-back, Juth, they've signed from the Czech League, looks like he's going to be a really good asset in terms of going forward anyway. Coming up with plenty of assists. I think it'll be back three for West Ham, which was the formation that Potter used to get the better of Arsenal. Lucas Paquetá, I think mentally is going to be in a much better place now with those betting charges no longer hanging over his head. And if he stays, then I think he will have a better season than he had last year. You mentioned Jarrod Bowen already. Callum Wilson signing's not gone down well with West Ham fans, because not only does he always score against them, he's tongue-in-cheek made a couple of disparaging comments about West Ham on various podcasts, which they're not happy about. And you mentioned the goalkeeper, Scott. The latest name there is John Victor, who you'd have seen play at the Club World Cup for Botafogo, 29-year-old Brazilian, I think available for about £10 million, which works with West Ham's budget. They have looked at Mads Hermansen too at Leicester and held talks with them, but he's going to be a lot more expensive. I think they realise they need to replace Areola. Probably he hammered a nail in his own coffin with that error that he made against Manchester United at the start of the pre-season tour, gave away a penalty after about 6 minutes.
Okay, let's round things off with the best of the transfer window. I noticed the other day that Crookmeister did a special kick-off show where he posed as Dr. Crook, which annoyed me a little bit because there's only one doctor in this house and it's not him. Welcome to the surgery. I am Dr. Sam Matterface, officially, by the way. I picked up
Congratulations.
Yes.
All those years
the
you
other
spent
week.
at university.
No, whatever.
Congrats,
Just
Sam.
acknowledge it. Doctor, not a doctor. Right, Crookmeister. Welcome to the table, listener. Sit down. We will give you some medical advice how we're going to revive your football club. Alexander Isak seems to be developing every couple of hours. I mean, when we started this podcast, what was the situation? What is it now? I mean, that is as fast moving as it gets with him. Liverpool certainly want him. Newcastle do not want to sell him, but he does not want to stay there.
Yeah, you say they don't want to sell him. I think that might change if they get Benjamin Šeško and get this deal over the line. Obviously, they're fearful of a hijack from Manchester United, but there do seem to be some positive noises coming out of the northeast today on that front that maybe they can get a deal done and that Manchester United financially aren't in a position to rival them. In terms of Isak, obviously he was in Spain training at Real Sociedad because he had a thigh injury that prevented him from flying to Singapore, but obviously the flight to Spain wasn't a problem. He is back now in the northeast. He has been at the training ground for about 3 hours, we're told, today, but Eddie Howe and his players weren't there. They've just got back from the Far East. He wants to leave, as you say. I think if they get Šeško in and Wissa, then I think the Liverpool deal probably will be revived and he will end up at Anfield.
Poor old Crookmeister has been tweeting a lot about this story, and he is basically the definition of shoot the messenger. The Newcastle fans are so unhappy with him. He's been called all sorts of names, some of them quite accurate, obviously. But he's been getting pelters for reporting the facts. Like, guys, don't shoot the messenger. The guy's just doing his job. Amorim giving Garnacho the kiss of death is another big story this week. He called him a talented player, but says it hasn't worked out for him. Why will it work out for him elsewhere? And Chelsea looks to be his destination, Scott Minto.
Good question. I mean, look, he's talented. You can't say he's not. And, sometimes the players, we talked about the culture many times, and many people have talked about it at Manchester United and how sort of wrong it's been. And I think it's almost, he's so embedded into that sort of bad, I don't want to say toxic, but that bad United culture of the last decade, that he can't switch now unless he just takes himself completely out of the environment. So if he does go to Chelsea, then it's a great opportunity for him. I think that left wing, slot is very much open. And you know what? It might just be what he and I talked about the wide players that perhaps the depth of quality Chelsea don't have. He might be perfect for them.
We were sat in this cafe actually in New York. It's called the Barking Dog Cafe, and Dennis, who is the one of the managers here, was talking to me about Inter Milan, his club, and he was going around our table asking everyone who they support. And he came to my son, he talked about Manchester United, and he said to him, "Why does everybody who leaves Manchester United go on and get better?" And we were like, "No, that is a good question. It's one that the Manchester United fans are asking themselves."
Or is that a bit of a myth? I mean,
I don't know. It's certainly a myth that's being perpetuated by a lot of people.
Marcus Rashford at Villa, was he that good for Aston Villa? Not good enough for them to buy him permanently. Anthony absolutely stunk the place out in the Conference League final against Chelsea when he was up against a half decent defender.
Yeah, but he had a good season in Spain.
In an inferior league, playing for an inferior club. I still maintain this is as good as it gets for Alejandro Garnacho. And when he's liking transfer stories from Fabrizio Romano linking him with clubs, that tells you why United want him off the wage.
Just because he didn't like yours.
He's got a little bit of talent. He's got a little bit of talent, but I'll tell you what, he's got one massive ego.
Yeah, well, he's not the only one. Yeah. Right, Zabani to PSG. Bournemouth losing 4 of their starting defence last season, if you include Kepa. How much of an issue is this going to be? And is he really going to PSG, Crook?
Well, I was going to say, he's not gone yet. And when I checked in at the end of last week, the two clubs were still some way apart in terms of valuation. He's gone with Bournemouth to their pre-season tour of America, so no sign that he's going to throw his toys out the pram. Clearly, this is a move that he would want to make. It's a huge step up, isn't it, from Bournemouth to the European champions? But they've got their asking price, Bournemouth, which is around about the €70 million mark. They've already made decent money by selling Milos Kerkez and Dean Howson, so they're not under any pressure. PSG are going to have to put the money down for this to happen. And no doubt, Bournemouth are working on a list of potential replacements because defensively, they do look a little bit light now. But on the positive side, they've kept Antoine Semenyo. He signed a new contract. And they've also kept the likes of Justin Kluivert and Marcus Tavernier, who are attracting interest from other clubs.
Yeah, interesting that, because, Scott, they could be one of those clubs that, the promoted side start to target, especially because the methods that Andoni Iraola uses are all about coordination and automation, and he needs time to work with them on the training ground to get them into that vogue. And if he hasn't got that defence ready for the start of the season, that's going to be very difficult for him.
Yes, it is. And, it's one thing to have a set of tactics and another thing to have the players good enough to be able to implement that. Look, I think in terms of the players that he'll pick, in terms of who they can try and bring in, will be right for them. But you're absolutely right. With his style, and I wouldn't call it unique, but it's certainly a niche way of playing, then you have to get used to that. It does take a bit of time. You need to be very, very fit as well as very communicative and know where the ball is and where you should be. So, but he's been there before, isn't he? He had a bad start a couple of seasons ago and turned it around. If he gets the players that he wants, I genuinely think he's that good a manager that I don't think they'll be flirting with relegation right at the very end, but there might be a bit of worry at some points during the season.
Everton after Tyler Dibbling, but Southampton want a bit more than they're offering.
Yeah, Everton are after a few players, actually. I think David Moyes has been quite public in his frustration about the lack of activity. We know that there's interest in Jack Grealish, but I think at the moment there'd need to be a significant compromise in terms of his wages. Tyler Dibbling, very talented young player, did well in the first half of last season under Russell Martin form, fell off a cliff after Martin left the club. Southampton want £45 million, we're told, which is a huge amount of money. Everton, I think, are up to 35 million plus add-ons, and they'll keep plugging away for him. And they're also in for Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. But again, Chelsea sources telling me that if he's to leave the club, Chelsea probably will want more than they paid to sign him from Leicester. So it's going to cost a few quid for David Moyes to get in the players that he wants.
And Daniel Farke, similarly, he's warned the Leeds board that his forward line are not up to Premier League level. He's not wrong, and we did this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we assessed the options that Leeds have got available to them, and we pointed this out ourselves, and he has backed that up. So what is the solution, Crook?
Well, I was just looking then. I've not heard of too many names in the forward areas. Obviously, they were trying to sign the Feyenoord winger, who maybe I'll let you guys pronounce, but he ended up going to Marseille, as I think was always likely.
Go on, give it a try. Go on, give it a try.
Let me get it for you. You put me on the spot here.
Come on, give it a try.
Clue.
Come on, give it a try.
That, really.
Is it João Pixel? Paxel. His name's not even João, I don't think. His name's not... Igor Paxel. Is that right?
We're going to go with you, yeah.
Igor Paxel, but he's off to Marseille anyway. But they've got
his
money.
Mates call him João.
Yeah, there you go.
We're going to call him João. We'll just call him João. Well, why not? Yeah,
Too many names to keep abreast of, I tell you, at this time of year.
Okay.
But they were willing to pay 30 million euros for him, so clearly the money is there to be spent. They just need to find the right player to spend it on. But I agree with Daniel Farker. They look really short of goals. And I wonder why they weren't in for Armando Broja. I know it's a bit of a gamble because of his injury record, but when he's fit, I think that would have been a good signing. He's off to Burnley instead.
Yeah, he doesn't stay fit long enough for me. And that is a problem, I'm afraid, especially in a league like the Premier League. Scotty, baby, I'll see you next week, Monday. You and I and Troy Deeney, if I can get him out of New York. He's staying just 4 blocks from me. So I'm going to see him a little bit later on for a coffee. And then I'm going to try and bring him back for Friday's show with the Crookmeister on his birthday, live on talkSPORT. Looking forward to that.
Well, just make sure you send me a little cheeky birthday wish as well on Wednesday.
When's your birthday? When's your birthday?
I know
this
it's
Wednesday.
In your diary. You just forgot about it.
Oh my God, Scotty, baby, I can't believe it. Have you hit 40 yet?
That's why I love you.
Yeah,
40 plus 14.
Yeah,
wow.
But you look younger than Crookmeister, don't you? Let's be honest
that's because I'm in need of a haircut. I'm surprised you haven't pointed that out. I'm off to the barbers before I see you both later.
And I've just come off on holiday as well, so that's probably why.
Yes, absolutely. Friday night, the EFL Championship season starts. League 1 and 2 already underway. Birmingham Ipswich, though, kicks off the Championship season live on talkSPORT. Friday night, 8 o'clock. Saturday, Southampton Wrexham, 12:30. Coventry versus Hull, 12:30 in the Championship on Saturday as well. Game day live with Adrian Durham, Dean Ashton, Lucy Ward and Mickey Gray. Takes you round the grounds at 2:30. Sunday, I'll be at Wembley, Liverpool against Crystal Palace, live from the Community Shield on talkSPORT. And then we have got the big preview next week coming out on Monday with Scotty, Crookie, Deeney and me. See you next week.